Hi everybody, my name's Charlie. I am the host of our system. We have DID, and I wanted to give you a resource that is kind of useful for when you're navigating the world of dissociative disorders, especially DID or OSDD, which is the Dissociative Dictionary. Now, our community has a lot of terms and uses a lot of terms that might seem foreign if you're just joining the community, if you're just learning. So this is kind of your conglomeration of information that you can refer to, and I'm going to go in alphabetical order so you can just skip through. If you're like, okay, what does fronting mean? You can skip and find where F is and find your answer here. So we're going to take you through the Dissociative Dictionary here, and hopefully this can be a useful tool for people. So sit back, grab a cup of tea, and I want to just be really clear with the disclaimer up front that there are going to be some terms in here that some systems do not use. There are going to be some system role titles in here, and a lot of systems don't use system roles. Our system is one system that we do not use system roles. We have a few videos that go into a little bit of explaining why. We actually have an upcoming video that will be kind of a deep dive into why we don't use system roles. But some do. The reason they're included in this list is because this is for definitions. You want to be able to understand it if it comes up. We don't necessarily have to agree with it or use it to want to know what it means. There are also some terms in this that might to some people seem controversial. Again, this is for the sake of definition, not for the sake of do we agree with it or not. Okay, so let's get started. So we're going to start out with age slider or age sliding. An age slider is an alter whose emotional or mental age changes over time. It usually goes between a range of ages, so maybe from 6 to 20. Sometimes they're younger, sometimes they're older. It can be a form of age regression at times, but it's an alter who at different points in time is at different levels of emotional and mental maturity. If I were to use it in a sentence, yeah, sometimes she does age regress and sometimes she's more childlike, but sometimes she's definitely an adult. So she's one of our system's age sliders. All right, on to number 2. Alter or part or headmate. There are many other terms as well, but these are kind of the 3 most common you will hear to refer to this definition. So this is a term for a singular identity within a system, which is someone with DID or OSDD. An alter stands for an alternate identity. Alter is the most commonly used of these 3 terms. Alter stands for alternate identity. It's most commonly used in professional and psychological settings, the term alter. But some systems do choose to use part, some systems use headmate, and some use them in different settings and interchangeably. If I were to use it in a sentence, maybe a friend of a system would say, I think I met one of your alters the other day. All right, apparently normal parts or ANPs. These are alters who present more covertly and more easily pass as the host of the system. Nothing about this alter's mannerisms would necessarily clue you in from the outside that this is a starkly different person. And give you a clue that this person has DID. So to use this in a sentence, maybe a system is talking to their friend. Yeah, it makes sense you didn't realize it was me fronting yesterday. Sarah in my system is an ANP, so she masks really easily. All right, on to the next. Blending, blendy, or blurry. So that generally refers to when there are 2 or more alters sharing the front, and having a hard time telling kind of where one starts and the other stops. Some systems will describe it as almost a temporary minor fusion, where they're so close that they're almost someone entirely new for that time when they're fronting together, when they're blended. To use it in a sentence, if someone asks who's fronting, maybe someone would say, honestly, I don't even know who I am right now. We're so blendy. On to Caretaker. Caretaker is one of those system roles that not all systems use. A caretaker is an alter whose main role is to care for others within the system. Oftentimes this will be the younger alters, and there are kind of two branches of caretakers, and there are multiple branches of caretakers, but oftentimes they will be separated into internal caretakers and external caretakers. So caretakers who take care of the body a little bit more, and caretakers who take care of people internally a little bit more. So to use it in a sentence, yeah, he had a flashback yesterday, but our caretaker helped him through it. Okay, to covert. Covert is a type of DID or OSDD system. Covert is a system who is structured to stay hidden. Almost all systems are covert. I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head. I believe it's somewhere around 93 or 94%. These systems will tend to, none of this, all systems are different, none of this is official or 100% of the time, but these systems will tend to have more ANPs, and they will tend to mask more often, and be more comfortable with masking. Also, more alters will often, when they might not identify with the body, they'll likely not feel necessarily like as uncomfortable in the body as they might in an overt system, which we'll get to later. Of course, again, these are generalizations for the sake of definition. To use in the sentence, of course you didn't know I have DID. I didn't either until recently. My system's really, really covert. Okay, on to co-consciousness, or co-con for short. So co-con refers to when two alters are both front to varying degrees at the same time. This could be an even split, or could be one fronting and the other just observing. There's usually a little bit more open communication during this, but the alters are still separate, and it's not like when you're blended and you can't tell where one starts and the other stops. There's still a clear separation, and it's two people working together rather than two people feeling like they're melding. To use in a sentence, if someone's asking a system who's fronting, the system might say, yeah, it's Ben, but Mark's co-con with me. Co-hosting. So co-hosting refers to a period in a system's life where two alters are sharing the responsibility or role of host in the system's life, which we'll get to what host means later, because the alphabet. So to use it in a sentence, I was struggling to take on the responsibility of host, so now Sarah is co-hosting with me. Core, or original, is the next one. So this one is the concept of the one who was born into the body. Now, this is an interesting one because the theory of structural dissociation is the current leading theory on how DID develops, which essentially states that a core or original doesn't exist and isn't how this works. However, some systems still identify with this. There are ways that it still makes sense why, with the theory of structural dissociation, some systems would still identify with a core or original. So read more about structural dissociation to really understand that. But essentially the leading theory suggests that there isn't truly a core or original, but some systems will still identify with that. And really, it's the type of thing where if you're speaking to someone with this disorder, you should defer to how they identify when you're speaking to them. But then when you're talking about clinical things, you defer to what the current leading practices are. So to use it in a sentence, someone might say, Tim is the core of our system. All right, so to dissociation. Dissociation is a general feeling of disconnectedness from one's self or surroundings. To use it in a sentence, I'm pretty sure I could blink and the day would pass. I'm so dissociated. All right, to emotional part, or EP. This is the other side of ANP, apparently normal part. So EP, emotional part, is an alter who's often stuck in a certain mental or emotional state or time due to trauma memories. So to use it in a sentence, someone might say, Maria is an EP, so if you meet her, just be aware she might not present the same or have the same needs as a lot of ANPs you've met so far in our system. EPs often do not commonly present quite the same as ANPs naturally and need to work a little bit harder to mask. Again, these are generalizations. Okay, emotional or memory bleed through. So this refers to when one alter starts to feel the feelings or remember the memories of another alter, often not in an intentional or structured way. To use it in a sentence, someone might say, today's been really bizarre. I've had a lot of emotional bleed through. I'm personally feeling emotionally fine, but I'm feeling a lot of someone else's grief. It's a really bizarre thing to experience. Yeah. All right, factives. Factives are one of the two types of interjects. Factives come from real life sources, whether they're alive today or not. A factive could be an interject of an abuser, a friend, a teacher, a historical figure, a celebrity, etc. To use in the sentence, in my system, I have a factive of my first grade teacher. Our alter isn't really the same, she just has the same name, but our teacher protected us, so we developed an alter inspired by her, I guess. On to fictive, the other type of interject. Fictives come from fictional sources. Fictives can be interjects of any type of fictional character. To use it in a sentence, our system has a fictive of Winnie the Pooh. We used to always watch it to try to distract ourselves, and it was a safe space for us as a kid, so now Pooh is a caretaker for our system. On to flashbacks. Flashbacks are memories that feel more like you're re-experiencing that same event in the present time. These can come along with physical sensory memories as well as severe mental distress. To use it in a sentence, it's a good idea to have grounding tools and plans for how to get through a flashback if you're someone who experiences them. All right, fragment. Fragment refers to an alter who's not necessarily a fully rounded person. Perhaps they're stuck in only one memory. Perhaps they only have one feeling that they experience. They'll often only handle one single emotion, memory, or task. To use it in a sentence, he chose the name sleep. He literally only fronts when we need to sleep. So I think that he's a fragment. All right, front, the front, or fronting. This refers to being conscious and in control of the body and its actions. To use it in a sentence, Mark is fronting right now. And that refers to the alter who is currently fronting. All right, functional multiplicity. Functional multiplicity is one of the potential goals in the therapy and healing process. Functional multiplicity refers to the goal of learning to work together to coexist in harmony in a functional and healthy way. To use in a sentence, we're working towards functional multiplicity in therapy. Fusion. So there's an important disclaimer to this one. This is really often misidentified as integration, and the term integration was used for a while in our community, and there's recently been a shift. So fusion refers to when two alters merge and become a new alter. The new alter is not either of the ones who came before, and they're their own new person, but they do carry some of the memories and traits of the alters who made them, who fused to create them. Fusion is one of the other potential goals in therapy, and it used to be considered the only goal. It used to be viewed as the only therapeutic goal for DID systems was to work to achieve full fusion, or final fusion, as a lot of people in our community call it. The goal would be to fuse all the way down to one identity. The thought being to get rid of this disorder. The thing that people have realized about this is that this disorder doesn't go away. So even if you do fuse down to one identity, you can always, your brain knows how to split again if you go through more trauma. You can always split again, even if you've fused all the way down. If you go through another traumatic event, you can split again. So there is no getting rid of this disorder. Also, this disorder is much more than just alters. So even if you do fuse down to one, you still have this disorder. That being said, fusion is a very valid goal in therapy. Fusion is a very valid goal in therapy. But it's important to just recognize that there are other healing paths, and it's not the only healing path, because for a long time it was viewed as the only potential healing path. So each system should be given the opportunity to choose what they want to do and what path they want to take towards their own healing and what goals they want to set. To use it in a sentence, our system recently had a fusion, so we're working on communication with the new alter. All right, Gatekeeper. Gatekeeper refers to an alter who has some level of control as to who fronts and or who has access to what memories. To use it in a sentence, Catherine's our gatekeeper, so I'll leave her a note to see if she might know who might remember that. All right, host. Host refers to the alter that spends the most time out in the body or runs the day-to-day routine life. An important reminder is that the host is also an alter in the system. The host can also change throughout the body's life. Our system has had multiple hosts throughout our life. The host is an alter. The host is not the main one. The host is not the real one. The host is not the dominant one. The host is just an alter within the system who happens to be filling a certain role within that period of the system's life. To use it in a sentence, Seth has been our host for the past 3 years and it's been going really smoothly. Internal or inside. This refers to anything or anyone that's happening or existing inside the system's mind. So to use it in a sentence, she's more of an internal alter. She doesn't front much, but she helps to care for others on the inside. Inner world or headspace. This refers to a more visualized and sometimes even physicalized world inside the system's head where alters might be able to interact. To use it in a sentence, I was able to have a conversation with Seth in our inner world the other day. It's helping us to build system communication. Integration. Another important disclaimer, this is the one that is often misidentified as fusion. Integration is the breaking down of amnesic barriers and the building of communication between alters. Integration is not two alters becoming one. While this can lead to fusions naturally by amnesic barriers coming down and that opening the gates for fusions to happen, it itself is not fusion. To use it in a sentence, our system has been integrating and it's been helping a lot with day-to-day functionality now that the daily amnesia is lowering significantly. All right, introject. There are two types of introjects in DID systems, fictives and factives, which we went over earlier. Introjects are alters who formed with some degree of inspiration or some characteristic taken from someone in the system's life. Remember that alters form in high moments of stress and trauma, and at the start they're forming from the mind of a child. A child's brain, especially in a moment of high stress and trauma, might not be creative enough to think up something new. It might instead think, if I were my gym coach, I could survive this. Because they're strong, they could get through anything. I can't. And then that child now has an alter who's an introject of their gym coach. And the alter's similarities with their gym coach might not be a lot. It might just be their name. They might look a little bit similar, but that's what their brain pulled the source from, because their brain wasn't creative in that moment. It was in survival mode. They can also come from animals, media, mythology, television, history, family, and more. It's just a child's brain trying to figure out what could survive, what they can't in that moment. To use in a sentence, she's an introject, but she doesn't tell people about her source because it's a pretty personal thing to her. All right, little. This refers to a child alter, generally under the age of 10. Some littles are emotionally and mentally very young. Some are only emotionally young. Some are only mentally young. All littles are very different, and it's really important to recognize that they're not all the same. Often people expect them all to be pretty much the same person because they all fall under the same label, and that's not the case. Also, some, including us, we no longer use the term little. And some feel really strongly about not using the term little for safety reasons because of cross communities that use that term that can bring up safety issues. So if a system asks you not to use that term for them, please take that seriously and do your best not to use it with them. Often, child alter, kid, young alter can be a great replacement. And you can just always ask. To use it in a sentence, he's 6 years old, so he's the oldest of our system's two littles. All right, mask or masking. The mask refers to the front that not the front that we talked about earlier, but the front, like the face that someone puts up of pretending to be normal. This is a term used in the mental health community in general, not just in the DID community, in reference to pretending to not have a mental illness and pretending to be mentally normal around others. In the case of DID and OSDD, the mask often refers to alters masking as the host or as the face of the system, which is kind of the person who the outside world knows the body as, who aren't aware that the system has DID or OSDD. To use it in a sentence, Sharon was fronting yesterday, but she was masking, so you probably didn't notice. Also, if you weren't aware, I'm not using alters names from our own system for these definitions. I'm using random names. Anyways, middle. Middle refers to an alter who is a preteen, generally between the ages of 10 to 13. To use it in a sentence, she's 12, so she's our system's only middle. All right, non-human alter. This refers to any alter who is anything other than human. Alters really can be anything, as they come from the mind of a child, or just the mind in general. And an alter's purpose in its creation is to mentally be able to withstand something that the child's mind didn't believe that they could survive. An example we always use is, trigger warning, imagine that a child is drowning. As they're in those really intense moments of thinking that their life is about to end, they're desperate and wondering what could possibly survive that because they can't. Maybe a fish could. Well, a fish could. Not maybe. A fish could. A fish could breathe underwater. Maybe they develop a fish alter. And then maybe someone gets them out of the water. They survive. Now, of course, this doesn't actually grant them the power to breathe underwater, but the brain did what it believed it could do to help in a moment of desperation for a child. Now they have a fish alter. Because alters don't just go away because the child's no longer in danger. This is just one example of how a non-human alter could be created. Non-human alters can also be half human, half animal, mythological creatures, and inanimate objects, and other things. But non-human alters are not generally fun. They usually exist because of really deep trauma, most alters exist because of deep trauma, and because of a deep moment of a need for survival. To use it in a sentence, we have two non-human alters in our system. All right, out. Similar to fronting, out refers to the action of being conscious and or in control of the body. To use it in a sentence, I was out for most of the day yesterday and was able to get a bunch of work done. All right, overt. So the opposite to covert, and only I believe like 6 to 7% of systems are overt. This is a system whose alters are more starkly different, present more differently to one another. These systems will have far fewer ANPs. Their switches will often be much more obvious. They will often have a harder time masking or just might not mask. To use it in a sentence, our system's overt and it's made our life really hard because people have always judged us a lot for it. All right, persecutor. A persecutor is another kind of system role type thing. This refers to an alter who tends to hold some of the darker memories of trauma and abuse, and often will try to help the system through controversial methods. That will often be something along the lines of identifying or sympathizing with their abusers, or trying to hurt themselves. Essentially, persecutors will tend to be very, very hurt people who are trying to help the system at their core, but they try to help using destructive methods. To use it in a sentence, we used to be afraid of our persecutors, but we are slowly learning to work with them. All right, polyfragmentation. Now, this is a term that's had a lot of definitions over time, and you'll see conflicting definitions from different sources. So it's hard to land on exactly which definition is the right one, so I'm just going to give you the different definitions that are out there. And the one that I believe we have seen to be the kind of general consensus that people seem to be moving towards. So some people will kind of tend to use what seems to us to be sort of arbitrary numbers, as in a polyfragmented system is a system with over 50 alters, or a system with over 100 alters. Others will say a polyfragmented system is a system with subsystems, which is basically a system with systems within it, which often means that there's kind of a segmented group of alters who don't have communication with this group of alters. Ultimately, though, the current definition that seems to be more agreed on, though, is just a system that splits and fuses much more easily than other systems. But all these definitions have been used. You will see them used in different places, and different people will have heard each of these things. So that's one of the things about our community and information being gotten from different places, is there are some terms that have conflicting definitions, and so the best I can do is give you all the different ones instead of trying to tell you this is the right one. So to use it in a sentence, I would say our system has a lot of changes pretty regularly, so I think we might be polyfragmented. Okay, programming. So programming refers generally to ritual or organized abuse where people or alters might be almost brainwashed to recognize certain things or patterns or phrases, etc., to respond in specific ways. To use in a sentence, one of her alters was programmed and would return to her abuser when she got a certain command. Protector. Protector is another system role. This refers to an alter whose job or role within the system is to protect. There are many types of protectors: physical protectors, sexual protectors, emotional protectors, etc. It's also important, we believe, to remember that every alter protects the system in their own way. To use it in a sentence, he is one of our main protectors. All right, roles. A role refers to an alter's internal job. within the system's internal functioning, generally coming from a point of safety and why each altar was formed. If an altar was formed for the need of physical defense, they might be a physical protector, and that's their system role. Not all systems use or believe in system roles. To use it in a sentence, she just recently found out what her system role is. All right, singlet. This refers, it's just a term for someone without DID or OSDD. To use it in a sentence, I only have one other system friend, all the rest are singlets. Split or splitting. This is the act of developing a new alter. This happens at a time of trauma or stress or need. To use it in a sentence, we recently had a new split. I haven't heard anything from them yet, but my friend apparently had a conversation with them. Okay, subsystem. A subsystem is a group of alters within a system who mostly or only have communication within that group and is fairly, if not entirely, separated from the rest of the system. So to use it in quotes, to use it in a sentence, we recently discovered we have an entire subsystem of 3 alters that we didn't even know of because none of us had communication with each other. Switching or switch. This refers to when the front gets taken or passed or changed from one alter to another. To use it in a sentence, I saw you guys switch for the first time yesterday. Switchy. This is the feeling that an alter might get before a switch happens. This usually only happens once communication starts to be built between alters and the switches begin to smooth out a bit with a transition period of co-consciousness. Not always, but often. To use it in a sentence, I'm feeling a little switchy, I might switch out in a minute. System. This is just referring to someone with DID or OSDD. This refers to the full collective of alters. To use it in a sentence, I'm friends with the host of their system, but I'm getting to know all of them now that they told me about their DID. Trauma holder. This refers to an alter who's aware of the trauma the body went through, or at least some of it, and often keeps that to themselves and holds that as a secret or keeps it hidden from the other alters for their safety. To use it in a sentence, she's a trauma holder and doesn't do well with touch, so please give her space when she's out. And trigger. A trigger is something that sets off trauma memories and trauma responses. Triggers can set off flashbacks, panic, or anxiety attacks, and more. To use in a sentence, having my wrist grabbed is a trigger for me, so please don't do that. All right, thank you guys so much. That is the list that we have as of now. We might make updates to this in the future. Please comment below if you have other things to add to this, but I hope that this helps someone, anyone, I don't know. I hope this is a good introduction to some of the terminology for some people. And yeah, I hope you all have wonderful days. I hope you take care of yourselves, and we will have some other videos coming out with some extrapolations on our own personal feelings towards some of the things like system roles that we talk about in here, but we wanted this to just be for the sake of definition, not for our own personal feelings. So, yeah, please be kind to yourselves, and we'll see you soon. Bye. Real quick jumping in because I forgot to say before, this list is available on the wiki we've been working on with another system. It's dissociative.wiki. It's under construction, but it is available for you to check out. So if you want to check that out, you can also see we wrote this whole thing out, and then we use that to make this video. So yeah, feel free to check that out if you want to see this whole resource in written form.